"Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the gangway." The voice was sharp, shaped to cut compliance out of stubbornness. Elias Mercer, 88 years old and feeling every ache in his bones, didn't move. His eyes weren't on the young officer addressing him, but on the towering gray hull of the USS Resolute. The ship smelled of fresh paint, salt air, and something else, a clean metallic scent that stirred memories buried under 7 decades of peace. He was certain he'd been invited. The folded letter in his pocket had been checked and rechecked until the paper felt like cloth. The officer's name tag read Rostova, her uniform starched to an unyielding crispness. Blonde hair pulled back into a severe bun, posture radiating the certainty of someone who'd only ever known the world in the black and white of regulations. "This quarterdeck is a controlled space," she said, gesturing toward a distant, roped-off area where the public waited for the commissioning ceremony. Families, dignitaries, enthusiasts, none of them in her way. "I have an invitation," Elias replied, his voice low but steady. "Unless that's accompanied by current military ID or an event access pass, you can't proceed." The crowd was starting to notice. Phones were raised, whispers growing. Rostova stood rigid, her gaze fixed on him like he was a problem to be solved. Elias admitted he had no current ID, but produced the letter from the Secretary of the Navy's office. She glanced at it, dismissed it as a generic veteran's note, and handed it back like it was contaminated. Her eyes fell on the left chest of his worn windbreaker, a faded patch, a silver trident piercing a storm cloud on a dark blue field. She tapped it with faint mockery. "Souvenir from your local VFW?" The touch and tone unlocked a door deep inside him. For a heartbeat, the pier dissolved into a roaring sea, diesel fumes, and the grip of a young man's hand over a brand new patch just like it. When the vision faded, Elias's eyes were clear. He stood his ground. Chief Petty Officer Miller had seen enough officers come and go to read a situation faster than most. Standing off to the side, he watched Lieutenant Rostova's exchange with Elias Mercer. He didn't recognize the man, but he recognized the look in his eyes, the deep, unshakable patience of someone who'd waited out storms far worse than this. The patch on Elias's chest nagged at him. Silver trident, storm cloud, dark blue field. It wasn't in any current unit catalog, but something about it hummed with history. The murmuring crowd and the shifting posture of senior officers in the VIP section told Miller this was no ordinary gate dispute. Without hesitation, Miller stepped back, shielding his phone from view, and called directly to the Admiral's flag aide aboard the USS Resolute. "It's Chief Miller," he said low. "You need to get the Admiral down here. Now." On the bridge, Rear Admiral Thompson was finalizing the ceremony schedule when the aide interrupted. "Sir, Chief Miller reports a civilian being detained at the gangway by Lieutenant Rostova, wearing a patch silver trident through a storm cloud on a blue field." Thompson froze mid-sentence. "Say that again." When the aide repeated it, the Admiral's color drained. He crossed to a secured terminal, tapping in a string of classified access codes until he reached a sealed archive, Operation Sea Serpent. On screen, a scanned image appeared. The exact patch description. Thompson stared at it for a long moment, then barked. "Get my command staff. Captain XO, Command Master Chief, we're going to the quarterdeck, now." Back on the pier, Rostova was losing patience. "Sir, this is my final warning. Please return to the public area, or I'll have the Master-at-Arms escort you." Elias stood silent. The sting of her tone wasn't angering him, it saddened him. She saw a frail old man blocking her checklist. She couldn't know the weight behind the patch she'd mocked. As her gloved hand reached for his arm, a voice thundered from above. "Lieutenant, stand down." Heads turned. Down the gangway marched Rear Admiral Thompson, flanked by the ship's captain, XO, and senior chiefs, their combined rank radiating authority that rolled over the pier like a wave. Rostova snapped to rigid attention, her face blanching. The Admiral's gaze locked only on Elias Mercer. Rear Admiral Thompson closed the distance in deliberate, echoing steps, the captain and XO just behind him. The chatter of the pier evaporated into a taut silence. He stopped one pace from Elias Mercer, and for a moment, simply looked at him. Really looked. Then, with a sharp, precise motion, the Admiral brought his hand to his brow in the crispest salute of his career. "Mr. Mercer," Thompson said, his voice thick with restrained emotion, "it is an honor, sir." Behind him, the entire command staff snapped to attention, rendering their own salutes. A dozen high-ranking officers saluting a civilian in a worn windbreaker. The crowd gasped. Lieutenant Rostova's eyes darted between them, confusion and dawning dread wrestling in her expression. The Admiral lowered his salute and turned to address the crowd. "For those who don't understand what you're witnessing, this man is Elias Mercer. That patch on his jacket is not a souvenir. It is the emblem of a unit that officially never existed, a Special Operations Task Force from the Korean War, codenamed Operation Sea Serpent." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Thompson's gaze returned to Elias. In 1952, intelligence reported 2 enemy cruisers preparing to leave Wonsan Harbor to ambush a U.S. carrier group. The harbor was a fortress: minefields, shore batteries, patrol boats. A conventional strike was suicide. So 12 men from the Navy's underwater demolition teams, the forerunners of today's SEALs, volunteered to go in. His voice carried across the pier, clear and unwavering. They paddled in at night, through mined waters in freezing temperatures, carrying limpet mines. They attached them to both cruisers under the enemy's nose. Discovered on the way out, they fought their way back under fire. Of the 12, only 4 made it to the submarine. Those 4 saved over 5,000 sailors on that carrier group. The mission was sealed for 70 years. He took a step closer to Elias. Then, Ensign Elias Mercer led that mission. He is the last surviving member of Sea Serpent. The letter in his pocket is not a form letter. It is a personal invitation from the Secretary of the Navy to be the guest of honor at the commissioning of this ship, the USS Resolute, named for the courage he and his men showed that night. The pier was utterly silent, the weight of history pressing down. Rostova's face was pale, her rigid certainty shattered. Thompson's voice cooled, turning to ice as he faced her. "You stand on a deck named to honor courage against impossible odds. You wear a uniform that symbolizes service and sacrifice. And when confronted with a hero of that history, you saw an obstacle." Her chin trembled, but she stayed at attention. "Your authority demands wisdom, Lieutenant. You have failed that demand." He stepped back. "Report to my flag captain's office at 0800 tomorrow. We will discuss your future." Turning back to Elias, Thompson's voice softened into apology. "Mr. Mercer, on behalf of the entire United States Navy, I am deeply sorry for the disrespect you've been shown." Elias raised a hand gently, cutting him off. "The uniform changes, ships get bigger, weapons get smarter, but the water is just as cold, and the fear's always the same. She was doing her job maybe too well. Don't be too hard on her. The hardest lessons are the ones you remember." In the days that followed, the incident on the pier of the USS Resolute spread quietly but relentlessly through the base. It wasn't an official report, it was a story passed from one sailor to another, gaining a kind of reverent weight with each telling. The image of a line of senior officers saluting an old man in a weathered jacket was burned into memory. Lieutenant Rostova didn't lose her commission. Admiral Thompson made that decision deliberately. Instead, she was reassigned to a task no one else could have imagined, for her designing and leading a new, fleet-wide training program on naval heritage and veteran relations. It was equal parts punishment and opportunity. Sailors were calling it the Rostova Mandate. At first, she bristled at the assignment. Her pride still stung from the public reprimand. But the more she read, diving into classified archives, debrief reports, and oral histories, the more she understood the chasm between knowing the regulations and understanding the people those regulations served. Elias Mercer returned to his quiet life, but the Navy's gratitude followed him. Invitations came in for lectures, private ceremonies, and heritage events. Most he politely declined. He wasn't looking for a spotlight, he'd had enough of that in one lifetime. Still, his path and Rostova's crossed again sooner than either expected. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, she walked into the local VFW hall where Elias was nursing a cup of black coffee. Out of uniform, she seemed smaller, more human. In her hands was a thick hardcover book, The Complete History of Naval Special Warfare. She approached his table cautiously. "Mr. Mercer, would you sign this for me?" He smiled warmly. "Only if you sit and have a coffee with me." When he signed, he didn't use the title page. He turned to the section on the Korean War UDT teams and wrote in the margin, "For Eva, never forget the sailors, not just the ships. Elias Mercer." She read it, and her eyes glistened. He waved away her stammered apology. "You're learning," he said. "That's better than any sorry." Elias leaned back in his chair, the low hum of rain against the VFW hall's windows filling the space between them. Rostova Eva now sat quietly, her fingers tracing the cover of the book as if holding something fragile. "You know," Elias began, "I once knew a man named Danny. Best radio man I ever sailed with. Came from a small town in Ohio, terrified of the dark. And yet, when the night got black enough to swallow the world, he never missed a word or a signal. Fear doesn't mean you run. Sometimes it means you hold your post, no matter what's coming at you." Eva listened, truly listened. For the first time, the hardness in her posture had melted, replaced by something deeper respect and the beginning of understanding. Elias wasn't trying to teach her about regulations or protocol. He was showing her the thread that tied every generation of sailor together. The quiet courage to stand in the worst moments, and the grace to see the person in front of you, not just the uniform. When they parted that afternoon, there was no handshake, no formal farewell. Just a shared nod between two people who had started on opposite sides of a confrontation and ended in the same place on the same side of the story. The legend of Elias Mercer didn't end on that pier. It lived on in the people who heard it, in the lessons carried forward, and in the knowledge that sometimes the truest measure of a hero is the humility to walk among us unnoticed.